All right, welcome to another episode. So today I'm going to pull this early A-body booster down to rebuild. Parts are on order from Harman. They have a lot of classic power booster kits. The kit is not cheap. For these early Bendix units, it's about $225 for the complete kit, and you really should get the complete kit, and I'll show you why once we get it apart. But first thing to do is just make sure you understand where everything is. Take lots of pictures. Since I'm making this video, I don't have to take pictures, but so if you say that the car's facing this way forward, the booster goes this way, comes in to the firewall through here. We'll notice that here is the vacuum intake. That's towards the engine. So that'll key us onto where this orientation of all this stuff is. And then I tend to like to scratch or grind a notch in this thing so you can see how to put it back together when you're ready. And this side here is down, so we'll put it mark down here so that it's hidden. You won't be able to see it when it's mounted in the car. Some index marks to put those back together the same way. All right, let's see if we can get this thing apart. It's a little rusty. I think he said it came from Michigan and lived the life in Michigan, in Las Vegas, and then Michigan again. So let's see if we can get these off without breaking them. I will admit, this is my first attempt at rebuilding one of these. I've always sent them to Booster Exchange, but I figured we'll learn how to do them. Well, that was a fail. I get used to parts and vehicles from the Southwest where there really isn't anything such as rust to any degree. Sometimes it works better to use be careful, you can use these as a levering tool. There we go. Don't want to mushroom it. So what I've done is went over to my bee blaster and just bee blasted all around this. Kept slowly working it. You got to be really careful because where this push rod goes in, these Chrysler ones are actually a plastic inner power piston, and where this push rod goes in, it pops into a plastic piece that I've actually got another booster that I pulled apart the other day, and it had a corner cracked off, and I'm sure it's because it being jammed sideways too much. So you need to work on this carefully. I was going to heat it with a torch, but I decided I didn't really want to take the risk of damaging that plastic, or I guess it's probably Bakelite is what it probably is. It's kind of a hard plastic that chips really easy, so I'm assuming it's Bakelite. So now that I've got it freed up a little bit, what you're going to find here is these are air intakes for this side of the booster, which is the firewall side, because that's the side that is at atmospheric pressure, so it pulls it in through here to allow the back side of this to breathe as the piston inside goes up or back and forth. So this is just a little piece of felt, basically, as a little air filter. That comes in the kit. As you can see, here's the hose. There's actually a rubber hose that runs around in here. We'll see when we pull it apart. You can either wait till you split it or take it off now. Doesn't matter. If it was stuck and wasn't coming out, I would have stopped and taken the screws out and split it so that I didn't actually damage that hose in there, because the actual correct one is not available. There's a couple bends in it. I think you can get a reproduction from Harman, but it's not formed. It's just a plain piece of hose that you have to put hose clamps on each end. All right, so let's pop it apart. Yeah, that's interesting. Self-tapping screws. I haven't seen that on the other one, and the one that I had rebuilt from Booster Exchange. I don't believe had those. Quick peek here. No, I take that back. This looks just like the one on my Valiant, so this might be factory, and the other one that I took apart had been apart once. Like I say, there is a pretty big spring in there, but it's not horribly strong. Just so that it doesn't fly apart and all the pieces go everywhere. You got to pull this off. The service manual tells you to not try to pull this out of the plastic plunger in there. So be careful on that. So now you can pop this off. And this one's got a lot of pitting in it. Actually, the other one I took apart, the cases are much nicer, so I'll probably use the other cases to put this back together. See, here you can see the hose. So this was like this on that filter cap. kits come with hose clamps to put on here. They don't give you a new hose, but they give you some hose clamps to put on it. The service manual actually tells you to put rubber cement in there. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do. Okay. So now here's the plunger. You can see this has had some water in it. So the spring's underneath this, so if this is stuck, this will keep the pedal from coming back. So if your pedal's not coming back, it's probably just because this thing's so rusty and grubby that the spring can't push it back. And this is a fascinating seal system in this, which we'll see once we get her apart. I can't quite get in where I want to go. I don't want to totally destroy that. There it goes. I think it's apart now. Alright, so here's where the problems could be, depending on how rusty it is. This one will have some pitting in it because the seal has to be around here, because the front side of this actually gets where the vacuum is, and it's where your master cylinder is. On these systems, you actually have to seal the master cylinder against this body, because this whole area in here is the vacuum. The air pushes on the back side of your power valve here. So this pulls a vacuum. The air out in the atmosphere is 14.7 pounds per square inch, something like that. That's what pushes it in. That's why you need the breathers on the back side of it in order to allow the natural air to get in. I don't know. I have to blast that and see how good it looks or how bad it looks. Like I said, I've got a better one, so I'll probably just use the better one and just use this as a spare someday. All right. So here's the big spring. Alrighty. So, like I say, this is kind of a fascinating little setup here. So, you need to make sure this is clocked right when you put it back into the can, but you'll be able to see that based on where this hose goes. And once you put the hose back on here, you'll know exactly where the back half of the can goes. And when you know where the back half of the can goes, because we ground that notch, we know where the front half of the can goes. So we've got everything we need to clock this back together the same way it came apart. And between the front and the back halves, when we take it apart, it'll be clocked obvious, because there's a slot right here where the air is allowed to go in. I'm sorry, this is the master cylinder side. So this is where the vacuum actually comes in to this side of the power valve. Yes, I'm old school, still using air pools. Few things to talk about on this side in a minute, but we'll just put this off to the side now. So here, you'll see what happens. You've got this spring on the outside, and there's a retainer, and there's a spring on the inside. So this inner side is what pushes, and this is where your foot is pushing on it, and pushing on this valve here. This is just a metal ring. It does two things. centers the spring, but this is also a piece of rubber for a seal. And when you put it down here, it actually allows the spring pressure to be spread out over the rubber, because that's what pushes back down. And then this is the poppet valve. This is a seal here. And if you noticed, it goes together up through here like this, so this seals it. And that's fundamentally how this thing works. Is you've got the vacuum coming in, the vacuum comes in through the hose into this port. That port dumps out in one more piece we can remove. This is just another retainer backing ring for the rubber seal. So you can see there's a slot, hopefully. There's a slot around here, partway around. That's where that vacuum hose goes into. So that's why these boosters need that external vacuum cylinder, because there is no vacuum storage in this booster. The only vacuum storage there is whatever's in this little tiny groove right here. So you've got the vacuum in that groove. When you're not applying the brakes, that's what this poppet valve does. It goes here and actually seals. There's a ring around here on the inside of the vacuum that's on the outer slot, like that. But when you push on the brake pedal, see how that jumps off? It jumps up and breaks the seal around this edge and allows the vacuum to dump into the center here. And once it dumps into the center, it can then find its way up into this hole through some other openings here in this. So on the seal on the outer, it's actually this rubber ring. That's the actual seal itself. But then, and notice which way it goes. It points this way, right? Because this is the vacuum is over here. So that means it's higher pressure on this side, so you want the higher pressure to actually catch behind this lip and push it out. Like any oil seal, you got to think about which way it goes from a sealing point of view. So that's just the rubber that goes around it. And then there's this really interesting finger spring band, and then a piece of felt that kind of holds in there. So you kind of have the felt in here to push back up on the rubber, and you've got these finger springs that push back out on the rubber. So the kit, I think that's one of the reasons why that kit is so expensive, because it comes with all this stuff new, because the rust just totally ruins the fingers. They're just so weak. They don't do anything anymore. These are all gone right here. So all right, that's that. Yeah, so this seal comes with the new kit, but this is so nice. I really would rather not destroy this if I don't have to. 9 times out of 10. Old stuff is still there we go. And now the valve can come out. And this is the part where they said don't ever take them apart. And now that I see this, I can understand why. So what happens here is, I think the reason they want this to never come apart is so in case the booster fails, you can still get your foot behind the brake pedal, pull the brake pedal up, and that would pull this back up and pull the diaphragm back up. I think it's just a CYA system. So that's when the poppet valve pops. Vacuum from the outside escapes over the lip into this center chamber, up through this hole, and then to the front. And then if you think about this, you got this thing in here like this. So what keeps a vacuum on this side? And it's really just this. So this will all be vacuum, this will be vacuum. So this is an important seal. All right, there's all that. And now, if you look at the other side, what's supposed to happen is just when this goes in like this. Now, this is what pushes on the master cylinder here. Normally, when you're having power boost, when you're in booster mode, this whole diaphragm just pushes forward because vacuum on the master cylinder side, atmospheric air over here pushing on it, pushes the whole thing forward. But there is something that's probably seized up in every one of these that's out there if it hasn't been redone. And what is supposed to happen is this is supposed to come out. So what is supposed to happen here is there's a rubber seal right down here. It's about yay thick. This goes here. So what happens is if you push the brakes hard enough and just slam them on hard, this is supposed to push it hard enough to actually push that big rubber seal back. This is supposed to slide forward just a tiny bit, but what it does is it releases the vacuum. So the way this is supposed to work is if you're in a panic stop and you're pressing the pedal really hard, the booster gives you something like a 10-to-1 ratio of how much pressure you're pushing. So the idea is, right, so that you don't have to push very hard in order to get a lot of pressure at the master cylinder pin. But what happens if you're in a panic stop and you just slam on those brakes? You know, in a panic stop, adrenaline's flowing and you can actually push that pedal way harder than you probably could when you were just normally doing it. Still, the booster is going to try to go to 10 times that extreme pressure that you're pushing, and that's going to cause lockup really easy. So what's supposed to happen is if you push on this hard enough, it's supposed to push in on that rubber seal in there. The rubber seal is another thing that's holding the vacuum on the side of the booster, which is this side. And what it's supposed to do is push this little plunger out just a little bit so that it releases that seal so the vacuum can bleed off quick, so that you actually lose the boost when you're in a panic stop and shoving on the pedal way hard. Problem is these get all jammed up and they don't come out. So if you've got a pedal that if you hit it hard and it locks up way easy, high probability that's what's going on. So to get this out can be tricky. You got to be very, very careful, because that is that plastic Bakelite kind of stuff. It can chip really easy. And I actually, on the other one, I actually did chip this corner a little bit because I tried to use something like this and it just barely fit in there, and I got it a little sideways and it just, when it tipped over, it snapped it out and I had to fix it with some epoxy. So be careful. So I'm going to use this socket, which still rides on the metal. It does not touch the plastic, so it's still a metal seal. And I've already hit it a couple times, and I'm just using this little socket here like this so that I have plenty of room. And I think the bench is just bouncing too much for me to, let me see if I can get it on the edge here. Did move a little bit. I'm going to put it down on the floor so I can actually have the backing a little more stable, because with the rubber that you're pounding, hitting in here, and this wood, it's just bouncing too much. So I'll be right back. And here we have it. You can see it's full of rust. And now I can push. There's that. There's the rubber seal. Plunger's out. So what I usually do here is I'll put this in a drill bit, spin it, sandpaper, just polish it up nice. I'm gonna go I'll bead blast this out and then polish it up with some emery cloth. And let me go do that and I'll be back. All right, so this is the way it should fit. Falls right in. So now, if you take this, put that in like it's supposed to be, and you put that in there. Now, what you'll see is there's a very thin gap right there, but when you push it hard enough, it actually picks that off the seat just a little bit. That's how that works. And other than that, it's time to just spend some quality time with the bead blaster, getting this stuff all cleaned up and ready for the kit. So here we are a couple hours later, all blasted. Now I know what I got. So, very pitted. This is going to need a little bit of body work. But that's cosmetic. If you look inside, you will see, you can see the pits in there. The other one that I have, I blasted as well. He is, I can't say he's any better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some JB weld. This is an old dirt bike trick. If you don't want to spend $500 on a KTM fork tube after you've dropped the bike and the fork hit a rock and chipped the chrome, and now you start getting fork seal leaks, I'll fill this in with JB weld, and then after it dries for a day or two, I'll just come back with sandpaper and just smooth it out, and keep polishing it up with finer sandpaper until it's nice and shiny and all those little grooves are filled in with JB weld. So that's the next step, but I think that's a step for tomorrow. The kit should be here probably early next week, so I'll try to get this done and all these parts painted before that, and we'll see you on the next one.